WOCA.
WOCA.
All right, 5 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in this morning. Can you imagine if your last name was Capone, Robin? I bet you, I guess knows what this feels like. Well, I know that for a fact. Deirdre Marie Capone is on the phone, and she has written a wonderful book about her, I guess it would be great uncle, right? Al Capone was her great uncle?
Yes.
The book is called Uncle Al Capone, The Untold Story from Inside His Family. And she's here it is, the grand niece of Public Enemy number one. Everything that you've ever known or thought you knew about Al Capone may not exactly be true. At least that's what it sounds like to me, including his involvement with the Valentine's Day Massacre that we probably are very familiar with. I guess most people are. Interesting story and a fascinating look at it. And you can imagine, like, if your name was Lee Harvey Oswald or something like that, you carry a family name with you. And in a way, maybe she's fixing the family name with the publishing of this book. Deirdre Marie Capone. Good morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Larry. Good morning, Robin.
Thank you for being on the air with us. And you're in South Florida somewhere.
I'm in the Fort Myers area, so I'm just a little bit south of you guys.
And did you know your great uncle? What do you call him? Grand uncle? What do you call him?
I called him Uncle Al. Yes, I knew him very well. My grandfather was Al's older brother and business partner. So, and we were a very close Italian family. My father was the firstborn of the new generation of Capones. So he was the heir apparent, and he was raised by Al's mother as though he were a sibling of Al. So we were very close. I was very involved. We cooked together. We ate together. We traveled together. So, yes, I knew him very well.
Oh, wow. And he had a home down there, didn't he, somewhere?
He had a home in Miami, on Miami Beach, on South Beach, correct.
Oh, okay. But was he there a lot, or was he mostly up in Chicago? He's from New York originally, right?
He was born in Brooklyn. He was the first one of his mother and father's children that was entirely conceived and born in America. And he really was the light of my grandmother's eyes, because that was the reason that they left their family in Italy and came to America, was for the promise of America.
Oh, wow. So you've set us up already with trying to be compassionate about somebody who we don't want to be compassionate about. Should we be compassionate about him, or do we have the wrong story?
What you have, for the most part, is a man by the name of Al Capone who has been fictionalized by all kinds of movies, books, newspaper articles. What I have discovered is that all of the former or the previous biographers who wrote about Al Capone, they always tried to find something that no other researcher found. And so in order to document it, a lot of evidence, a lot of records have been falsified. So I'm working on a second book right now just to get the truths out there. If I don't do it, it will be lost for historical value. And I just want to have the correct things out there so researchers can at least see something different. Am I out here to change history? No. Can I change public opinion? No. I feel obligated to my ancestors that I get as much of the truth out there as I possibly can.
Okay. And is there anything that's just point blank wrong? The one question, well, there's probably more than one, but the Valentine's Day Massacre, I know the story was that he wasn't there, but that he ordered that. Is there any truth to that at all?
No, there is not. And it's amazing to me, Larry. My family told me the truth. My uncle, Al's youngest brother, Matthew, was in the alley with Machine Gun Jack McGurn, and they were trying to see what time, Bugs Moran would go into the office and so on. Because my uncle wanted to tell Bugs, hey, your head is getting too big for your hat. We've got enough business for everybody. You don't need to be taking, business away from me. That's all that they were going to do. So my uncle said that they were in the alley and they see this black touring car going up and down the alley. And he said, Deirdre, it was filled with policemen. And he said, I was afraid that they were going to arrest me for loitering and, pull me into jail. So they left. And it was right after that the crime took place. Also, I have another.
And those were the fake policemen, right?
They were real police.
Oh, real.
Oh,
but weren't the shooters disguised as police officers?
Well, that's what they said, that they were disguised as police officers because of the police, business itself. They didn't want, people to think that the police actually did it, but the police did do it. The so-called mechanic that was killed in the Valentine's Day Massacre was the brother-in-law of my husband's aunt. She was a May. He was a May. And he would come home from work every day complaining that the police were stealing alcohol off the back of Bugs Moran's trucks. And Bugs was going to turn them into the lieutenant. Also, Larry, another thing I want to say is my book and also a book by Jonathan Eig called Get Capone are the only two books that show that Al Capone had nothing to do with the Valentine's Day Massacre. All of these other writers who made their living by saying that, Al Capone did orchestrate it, no one has come out against us.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
They have not challenged us.
Well, that says a lot right there.
It does. It does say a lot.
All right, so the story, and please forgive me for not knowing everything about Al Capone, but he was actually, time in prison was always for tax evasion. He never really had any serious charges, or verdicts.
Correct.
Am I right? Yeah.
And that's how they got all of the Italian bootleggers in the city of Chicago. They got them all on income tax evasion. And for your information, when the income tax law was first written in 1918, there was a provision in the law that said people did not have to declare income that was earned illegally because that would be against their Fifth Amendment right. It would tend to incriminate them. So none of these bootleggers thought that they had to put this income down.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, wow.
It's funny.
You write that your grandfather Ralph Capone was listed as public enemy number 3 in
Correct.
1930. Why did your family gravitate toward, a life of crime?
Because that was probably the only thing that was available. And also, when people say it was a life of crime, my uncle was quoted, saying, all right, if I'm breaking the law, then my customers are every bit as guilty as I am. Prohibition was very unpopular. And the people in the rural areas could make their own beer, build their own stills, and produce alcohol. The people in the cities could not. There was an Al Capone counterpart in every major city in the United States because people wanted alcohol. Why is Al Capone the infamous one? Well, Chicago happened to be the wettest city in the United States. And the reason that there was more alcohol consumed there is because the mayor of Chicago at that time, Mayor Bill Thompson, didn't believe in the 18th Amendment, and he told the police in the city of Chicago not to enforce it. So there was, any raid that was done on a speakeasy in the city of Chicago during those times never had any customers. When the police raided the place, the only thing that was there was the bartender, because they knew ahead of time that the police needed to make some raids so that the newspapers could write about it. But really, the law was not enforced in the city of Chicago.
One of the things in the book that we enjoyed reading or seeing were the recipes, the Capone family recipes. And I'm just trying to imagine how this is going to spiral. And I'm guessing Martha Stewart, she spent some time in jail.
Yeah.
She might enjoy having a Capone day.
There you go.
There you go.
I don't know. I'm just trying to imagine where this is going to go. Another thing I wanted to point out, you have photographs in the book, and Teresa Capone, his mom,
Correct.
boy, really looks like. I mean, he really looks like her. He really got her looks.
Correct. If you take a look at their only sister, Mafalda, my Aunt Matthew, I look exactly like her. You
do.
I do.
Oh wow. Let me see. Okay. Oh wow. Well, you're a pretty lady.
Thank you.
So you knew him. Let's see. How much time did he actually? He died in prison, right? He had syphilis.
No, he did not die in prison, and yes, he did have syphilis.
Okay.
I think probably most people at that time had some form of venereal disease because there was no such thing as safe sex back then. My mother became senile in her later years. They tested her for venereal disease, and she did have the remnants of it. So, yes, he had syphilis. He did not die in prison. He was getting out of prison, and before he got out, the officials in Alcatraz asked my grandfather if they could test a new treatment for syphilis on Al Capone. That way he would be healthy when he got out of prison. So they transferred him from Alcatraz to Terminal Island, which is a hospital off of Los Angeles, that's where you start to see where there's reports of Al Capone being angry, being violent, being put into solitary confinement. He was needles. Well, it was because they started treating my uncle with injections of mercury. And we all know the brain.
Oh, wow. Is that where he cut in line and another prisoner cut his neck or something?
Correct. That's all. When all of that happened, otherwise he was getting out of prison time off for good behavior. You know, I go out to Alcatraz to sign books, and they have up on the wall all of the crimes that the inmates had committed. There were 2 people that were incarcerated at Alcatraz, which was opened for the primary purpose of incarcerating irredeemable men who could never return back to society. And that was not Al Capone. He got out of prison in 1939. He died in 1947. You cannot find any bad press about him at all. And my grandfather, too. My grandfather stopped, doing the business in the 30s, and he died in 1974, and you cannot find any bad press about him at all. In fact, you can find all kinds of good things that they did.
The book is called Uncle Al Capone. It is the untold story from inside his family, written by his grandniece,
yes.
Deirdre Marie Capone, and who was on the phone, South Florida. So she's one of the lucky warm ones right now. Let's get away from the crime just for a second and talk about showbiz. He was involved in some showbiz personalities, right?
Well, my grandfather owned a club in Cicero, Illinois, called the Cotton Club, and he patterned it after the Cotton Club in Harlem, which was owned by Oni Madden, a very good friend of my grandfather's. And it gave black entertainers a chance to entertain. The difference between Harlem and Cicero is Harlem, of course, was in the middle of a black, residential area.
Right.
The one in Cicero, the black entertainers had to be chauffeured out of the black ghetto area into Cicero, otherwise they would have been attacked. My grandfather took me to a club in Chicago called the Chez Paris, where Nat King Cole was performing. And afterwards, we were invited back to his dressing room. And Nat King Cole himself looked at me and said he would not have had the career that he had if it wasn't for my family giving him that break.
Oh, wow. Was it in the form of money? Did they help finance part of what he did, or was it just the...
No, he had a chance to entertain in Chicago.
Oh, just to be able to be there.
Able to perform before people in the city of Chicago, which was white, and
Right,
he had
right.
a chance to show the world what he could do.
And that would have been in what the 40s?
That was in the 30s.
In the 30s. And,
Correct.
we always have this illusion that the North was not that way toward black people, but it was. I mean, we always have this illusion that the South was bad, the North was good when it came to race relations, but it wasn't true.
Correct. You have to remember, at my family's time, the Italian people were the low people on the totem pole. They were the last to be hired and the first to be fired. So they had a natural soft spot in their heart when they saw the plight of the blacks who were
Right,
being
right.
treated the same way. So they were naturally more giving and more understanding, especially my family.
So what do
And-
you... Oh, I'm sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
And you also say that he tried to integrate the baseball.
Correct. He was going to buy the Chicago Cubs, and he was going to bring Satchel Paige up to be the first black pitcher for the major leagues.
Wow.
If he would have done that, would he have met with resistance?
Oh, of course.
He liked resistance. well, maybe that's part of the image we have of Al Capone that is accurate. I mean, he seemed like a
Correct.
no-nonsense guy. Is that right?
They were all no nonsense. They absolutely were no nonsense. There was a bit of a battle between my grandfather and his son, my father. My grandfather had one child, my father had one child, me. And there was always kind of a battle going on between my grandfather and my father, and I think it was because my grandfather was born in Italy. He immigrated over to America with his mother. They were raised in Brooklyn in a tenement. They were street-wise and tough kids. Well, my father came along, and he was raised in the 20s, where he was sent to the movie theater in a chauffeur-driven limousine with $100 bill in his pocket. So he had an entirely different view on things. He had more of an entitlement feeling than his father ever had. So there was always a bit of tension between those two.
So going back to the reason he was in prison in the first place, I guess it didn't sink in, but it's rattling around right now. He actually, because of the ruling that said if you made money illegally, you didn't have to report it. So technically, he was serving time. They had wrongfully imprisoned him, technically.
Well, not wrongfully, but if you look, the only people that spent time in prison for income tax evasion were the Italian bootleggers in the city of Chicago. Old Joe Kennedy was every bit as big a bootlegger.
Yeah.
And he didn't serve any time in prison. So there was 6 businessmen in the city of Chicago. They called them the Secret Six. And they took great exception to these Italian boys, sons of immigrants, that rose to power, and they had all this influence, and the people in the city of Chicago loved them. They looked on the Capone boys as though they were Robin Hood. I mean, they opened up the first soup kitchens the world has ever seen after the stock market crash. They fed people every day for over 2 years.
Wow.
The movie The Godfather has a portion of it where I'm guessing they fictionalized, but just kind of clear that up for us. Is that part of the story true, or is anything about that true at all? Where Al Capone, what was it again? He sent somebody to help out in New York. I can't remember the whole thing.
Well, the Godfather really was a true story on the Gambino family in New York. I think they kind of made, the lead character to look and act more like Al Capone. But no, that was really true. Those kinds of things actually happened. Also, the movie The Streets of New York, that's true. There was great battles between the Irish immigrants and the Italian immigrants in New York during those days. When the Italians came in, they became the low people on the totem pole, and all of a sudden it elevated, the Irish. And if you look at what was going on in those days, we were turning from a rural country into an urban country, and it opened up businesses, mainly fire, police, and schools. And the Irish really infiltrated all of those positions. I mean, the Irish, teachers, the Irish firefighters, the Irish policemen. I mean, that's the jobs that they did. And so when Prohibition started, it created an opportunity for the low people on the totem pole, the Italians, to earn some money and to feed and take care of their families. And that's just evolution.
Well, you bring the sense of humanness to Al Capone. If we wouldn't have known, his business or anything like that, we would have, through your book, seen things in him where he was just a normal guy. In fact, you said he taught you to play the mandolin when you were 7?
Correct. I was 5 at
5.
that time. I was 5 years old. But yeah, I mean, as I say, I'm not going to change history. I'm not going to change anybody's perception. But there has never been anyone who has written anything about Al Capone who actually knew him. I am the first person to write anything about Al Capone.
Oh, wow, that is amazing. So
by somebody that knew him. I mean,
so
people don't know that he had blue eyes.
No, black and white photos don't tell you that.
No, but he had blue eyes.
So let me ask you something. So there's a book now, and I'm holding it in my hand. It's called Uncle Al Capone. Is this the result of you and your family sitting around and said, somebody's got to tell the real story? Were you watching a movie and you were throwing popcorn at it saying, this is all wrong?
Well, my father was writing a book when he died. It was called The Sins of the Father. And so my grandfather asked me, he told me things, he taught me things, but he asked me to not write the book until all the original family members had died. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, my father was naming names of the politicians and the police who, did all the things that they did, and of course that was dangerous. Now all of those people are dead. And also the men of that era, how amazing it was for me that my grandfather schooled me, because men of that era never shared anything with women. They never brought their business home. And also they practiced something that is called omerta. You know nothing. You saw nothing. You heard nothing. And you just don't know anything. So for him to share those things with me is quite remarkable.
Why did your dad commit suicide?
Well, there's still speculation that he was killed. But the final result of the hearing was that he took his own life, so I will go along with that. But he was writing a book, and I think there were many people that were afraid that he would name names and tell what was really going on.
What a fascinating story, and we really appreciate the fact that you've come on our show to talk about it, Deirdre.
Thank you, Larry.
Let me just give away the copy I have. Deirdre sent us a copy, so let me give it away to one listener. If you'd like the book, call me at 622-9622. That is the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline. The book is called Uncle Al Capone, The Untold Story from Inside His Family. Deirdre Marie Capone is the author, and I will give it away. And also, I need to know how the rest of us can buy it. Deirdre, do you have a website you want to let us know about? Is it everywhere books are sold?
Everywhere books are sold, but my website, UncleAlCapone.com, they can buy a copy. I will inscribe it and personalize it to them and put it in the mail. So if they want an autographed copy, go to UncleAlCapone.com.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. Let me give this one away. Good morning. You've got the book. And by the way, the phone's lit up when I offered it. Good morning. You've got it. Who's this?
This is Rick. Thank you.
Who is it?
Rick?
Rick. Okay, you know where we are, right, Rick?
Yes, sir.
Okay, right in the Paddock Mall. Thank you, Rick.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
How did your children and your grandchildren adjust when they found out about your family? Or did you keep it secret?
I kept it secret. I didn't tell my children their heritage, mainly because my aunt, who was the sister of Johnny May, I didn't want her to know who I was. But and then we moved to Minnesota. I moved out of Chicago in 1972 and moved up to Minnesota. My husband was starting a business up there. No one in Minnesota knew who I was, and my wings literally spread. So I credit the strong, Capone genes for my business acumen. But one day, one of my sons came home from school, and I said, what are you learning in school today, Bob? And he was about 11, I guess he was about 12 years old at that time. And he said, we're studying about this gangster called Al Capone.
What's his name, Capone? Was your...
No.
No, okay.
My married name.
Okay.
And it was like I was sucker punched, and I almost fainted. So I went to my husband and I said, we're going to have to tell the kids their heritage before they find out about it from somebody else. So after all the children were home, I called them all into the kitchen. My husband was standing there with me. They knew something was up. And I said, kids, I've got something to tell you. I was born Deirdre Marie Capone. Al Capone is my uncle. The children looked at me, they looked at each other, then they looked back at me, and this is the truth. The four of them in unison looked at me and went, cool, Mom.
Yeah, I bet they did. They wanted to go get they wanted a fedora, right?
I know. I didn't expect that. And I thought they were going to hate me because they had gangster blood in their veins. So
Yeah.
I got out the family album. I started to teach them, took them to Chicago to meet everybody, took them to meet my grandfather. So they had a chance to,
Oh, wow.
get in touch with their roots. Then in the late 80s, our two youngest sons returned back to their birth city, Chicago, to get their education. And they were at Northwestern University. And that's when the movie The Untouchables with Robert De Niro came out. That movie put a very ugly face on the whole Prohibition era. And so my boys would say, Mom, you've got to write. You've got to tell people that we're not bad people. So that is what got me going on writing the book.
Oh, wow. Fascinating stuff. Again, it's an honor to be able to say you've been on our show, Deirdre. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Robin.
I just went to your website, and there's a nice video of you on an interview somewhere.
Correct. That was on Chicago Tonight, and he does a very good job there. But that's UncleAlCapone.com, and I've got a blog, and I post things on the blog all the time, truths about my family. Like all these other authors said, Al Capone had 3 scars on his left cheek. He had 1 scar. I used to sit there, I used to touch it, I used to kiss it. There was 1 scar on his left cheek.
Wow. Well, you've held us all spellbound, Deirdre. Thank you for coming on the air with us today. Good luck with everything. And if you're ever in this part of the state, come in. We've got a beautiful studio at the local mall, the Paddock Mall.
Okay, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do an in-studio with you guys. I'm not that far away.
No, you're really not. Deirdre, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Robin. I enjoyed this. Have a great day.
Thank you. We'll take a little break and be right back.
Hi, this is Brad. I want to take a moment to talk about a serious issue. In the next 5 years, the aviation industry is projected to have a shortage of commercial pilots. Now is the time to start training. Ocala Flying Club has started a scholarship for the youth of Marion County ages 17 to 24. The club will donate up to $4,000 towards a pilot's license. This will help get the student on their way to obtaining their commercial pilot license. If this sounds like something you would be interested in, or if you know someone that would be, please contact Ocala Aviation Services, 861-7484.
Hey, it's Christy with Ocala Mac and PC Repair and Ocala Guest Wi-Fi to let you know we have you covered. We are the only local certified Apple and Microsoft computer company in Ocala. We are family owned and operated. From mobile repair to wireless networks, viruses, new systems, or security cameras, we do it all. Check us out online, OcalaMacPC.com, or give us a call, 352-566-8324.
Tell them Nick, Madison, or Mason